The Christchurch Chester podcast.
Right, morning Christchurch, can you hear me? Yeah. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Becky, and I do the church accounts with Glenn Carty, who does all the bookkeeping. So you've been keeping us busy this year. What I'm going to talk to you this morning about is what we've done this year and how we've done in compared to what we thought we were going to do. How we've generated money, how we've used the money, and how that looks compared to 2009, so what changed. I'm also going to look at the decisions as a PCC we've been praying about and thinking about, and what we're going to do going forwards. And with the money that we've got, what can we do? So really looking at what we're budgeting to do. Okay. Oh. Here we go. Right. I'll try and make it quick because I know lots of people aren't entirely joyful about sitting here listening to figures being thrown at them. So 2010 was a good year. Unrestricted giving increased, and it was in line with budget by about 0.1%. I know. I don't think it was the skill of my budgeting. I think that's God's, but there we go. We were able to increase the number of part-time paid employees that we had. We had the community worker previously, and the student worker. We've also got now a community hub admin verger, or a CHAV, as Andrew liked to call it, and a youth worker. We've saved enough money over the last couple of years. I remember standing here 4 years ago saying, we're really cold and we really need heating and we don't have any money. And now we're in sort of nearing the final stages of inputting all the heating and paying for it. So we saved up that money in the space of 4 years to be able to do that. And for the first time in 2010, we had what we called a generosity fund, or a Wind the Spirit fund, which was 10% of our gross unrestricted income, which we felt we could give to other missions beyond our control, but that were in line with our values as a church, and to really be able to bless that. And we did that in a number of instances in the UK and overseas. So a great blessing on other people because of what we've managed to do this year. I haven't got the hang of this. There we go. Right, income. So we received, our income for the year was £94,000. Yeah? Woo. Against the budget of £94,000. Woo. We had giving and gift aid on top of that, which was in line with budget. We didn't receive the grant income. If you see, the grant income is blank for this year. It's £5,000 last year. What happens, we were given a 3-year grant for the community worker, and because we didn't have a community worker for the second half of the year, we didn't claim the grant last year, but what we will do is claim that in 2011. Now we've got CAS in situ, so that was expected. But to sort of counteract that, for the mission house, we had a surprise, a debtor decided to pay us from years ago of £4,000, so that was up against budget. If you look at that compared to 2009, in the shaded column over there, you'll see that 2009 we had £132,000 of income, so you might be thinking, hang on, you're telling us you're doing really well, but it's decreased. Well, that was because in 2009 we had a whole host of one-off items. We had some large donations towards the heating fund, we had a considerable amount of grant income, and some legacies left as well. So if you look at the sort of recurring unrestricted income, it's actually increased. So we've obviously spent that money and then a little bit more. Why? How? Well, the biggest expenditure that we have as a church is the parish share. And I'll talk to you more about that later on. But that, in 2009 was £45,000, and this year it was £50,000. So straight away we spent £5,000 more. We've got the normal running costs of the church. We've got the student team. We spent more on the generosity fund because we didn't have one the previous year. We had the community worker, the youth worker, and obviously then the vicarage costs. We had various bits of admin. Where we were under budget in our spending, if you like, is the building work. We anticipated we would have spent some of the money in 2010, and in fact we're just rolling it forwards to 2011. So the money's just sitting there waiting for us to use. So Before we move on, I'll just remind you about the reserves policy. When I stood here last year, we didn't really have sort of a, what are we doing with our money? We're spending it and we're saying, yeah, we need to get rid of this money because we're not a business. We're not here to hoard all the money and save it and hang on to it. We want to use it to bless things and to do things. So ideally, we want to get to a point at the end of each year where we don't have spare cash lying around. We've got it assigned something. We know what it's going to be used for. So on the upshot, the other side of that was we didn't want to suddenly realise we didn't have enough money to pay the gas bill and we didn't have enough money to pay the students' worker and the like. So we came up with a reserves policy which would give us that sort of buffer, if you like, a sort of fallback. So the policy was to hold funds of equivalent to a quarter of the year's expenditure. So like a disaster fund. If something went horribly wrong, we would be able to run the church for 3 months. The other thing was we were going to keep a small amount behind to make sure that if there was any desperate building work, that we would be able to do the building work, things that we knew about, like the roof and things. And the other thing is you can't employ people. We've got a duty of care to these people that if we employ them for 12 months, we need to be able to pay them for that 12 months. So we make sure that if we offer somebody a contract, we've got the money there that we are going to be able to honour that. So with this in mind, our reserves actually at the beginning of the year were £153,000. Wow! You're like, why do we need to make more money then? Because we've got loads. But these reserves, they're tricky. Some of it is sort of untouchable. It's tied up in reserves. And although we can use the interest of it, we can't actually use the money itself. Some of it is restricted legally. We can only use it for what it's been given to us for. So, for example, the heating fund, if somebody gave me money and said it's for the heating fund, I couldn't use that to pay the community worker. Other bits of this, then, you'll see as we go through, are designated to be used for the next year or so. So at the top, we've got this £44,000 endowment fund, can't touch it. It's there, it's at ours, but we can only have the interest off it. Underneath that, you've got the 20,000 and the 5,000. The 20,000 is the quarterly expenditure, our emergency fund, and the 5,000 is the emergency building fund. So at any one point, we need to make sure as a church we've got that £69,000 in reserves, because if we go below that, then we're in difficulties. So anything above that, we then allocate either to its restricted pot or to what we want to use it for. So you can see at the end of 2010, we've still got the building fund money sat there because we haven't paid the guys who've put it in yet. So we'll do that in February, and that will decrease then, as you can see, in 2011 to zero. We've got the restricted community worker fund. Now that's funded not by ourselves, but by a grant that we've received. And that's restricted. We can't use it for anybody else. So that guarantees that community worker then for the next year. We've also got bits of student worker, this is designated, and the youth worker, designated funds, and our generosity fund that we put aside and we say, we know in the next year or two, we need that money to support that. Now, if you look forward to the column 2012, all those funds go to zero. This is where we don't have the reserves in hand to be able to meet those requirements, and this is where we have to get income and be able to put aside money to fund those things going forwards. So, the budget for 2011. We, as a PCC, had an away day, and Glenn and myself got together the financial information and gave that to the PCC so they could make some decisions about where we're moving forwards and what we're going to do with the money. The church running costs are obviously something that we just have to cover. We don't really have a choice about it. We assumed in this budget that we wouldn't have a vicar or a vicarage until 2012. So although we won't incur those costs this year, when we have a new vicar, we will incur some costs initially to sort of kit them out in the vicarage and then obviously going forwards. We're assuming that we're going to get rid of the heating fund and pay for all the heating now. We're assuming that there's going to be no major work on the mission house. We've got a mission house body of people, a project team, but whatever work we do on the mission house will be funded by grants. We've got a little bit to start them off, but then we're not actually, as a church, going to pay for the whole thing. The community worker, as I've said before, is funded by the grant. The student worker, we've always had really strong connections with the students, and as a PCC we feel this is something that we want to continue, and so we're hoping to, we've put money aside to continue that to the middle of 2012. at least. And then obviously the basic necessities of running a church need to be covered as well. The largest of which is the parish share, which I touched on briefly. The parish share has gone up every year. And I had a question after the earlier service this morning saying, well, why are we paying it if we haven't got a vicar? But we have to pay it, we have to meet it. It doesn't pay the vicar's salary as such, it doesn't. It's something that they collect, basically based on different things like the socio-economic rating and where you are and your clergy and so on. So you can see each year, for those of you who do better with pictures rather than numbers, it's gone up. So each year we're having to find that bit extra income to cover that parish share because we have to pay it. It's our responsibility. So it's calculated per clergy, per parish. It pays for, the pension, the housing, the training, the support. It covers everything. The actual cost to the diocese just for the clergy is about £37,000, but it's all these things on top. So with that in mind, we've covered our heating costs, we've covered our parish share, we've got our student worker, we've got the grant for the community worker. When we look at income now next year, we're going to look at how much we think we're going to get in. And when we've sat down and had a look at it with Glenn, we think we're going to be £22,000 less than we had in 2010, which is a lot of money. Why has this happened? Obviously, the current economic climate, it's very difficult for people to be able to give maybe what they would have done previously. There's people leaving during the interregnum. It's a hard time for the church as a whole. One-off gifts in 2010 that we've had, generous gifts, they might not be repeated. We can't count on that. So when we look forwards, when we project the income, we only take what we know is regular giving. And then there's a decrease in the amount of gift aid we receive. The government gives tax back, and they have been giving us 28%, and now it's dropping to 25% in April. So there's all these things which contribute to getting less income. So there's going to be shortfalls in funding, again, for the picture-friendly people. The yellow ones next year, the red ones this year. It's gone down. So we really want to be able to carry on doing our youth work, and we really feel that the Generosity Fund has been really valuable this year, and having that money to be able to bless projects outside of the church. But currently, obviously, income is looking like it's not as high as it was. To give you an idea of sort of what we would be looking at to fund these things, and we have some money that could go towards these items, but nowhere near enough. So we've got some money set aside, but not enough. So to fund the youth worker for 12 months would cost us as a church £6,312. If you want to sort of look at that in terms of, well, what would that mean if I gave something? If it was 20 people, it'd be £26 a month. But if it was 100 people, it'd be £5 a month, which sounds much better. Likewise, with the Generosity Fund, if we wanted to give away 10% of our gross income, then that would be £6,500. So in a similar fashion, it would be 20 people giving £27 a month, or 100 people giving £5.50. So how can you help? If Christchurch, you're feeling like Christchurch is your spiritual home, and you're not on a giving scheme, if you feel it's something you would like to do, please come and talk to myself or Helen Parker, who's waiting. Helen's our giving coordinator, and she's got all the information. Or Glenn over there, he'll give us a wave. There we go. Any of the three of us will be able to help you. We've got pledge forms in the letters today, which has a pledge form and a standing order form. The pledge form is a statement of intent. It's not a contract. We wouldn't hold you to it, if you like. If your circumstances change, don't worry. It's okay. But there's different ways you can give. There's standing orders. There's envelope systems. We'd like you to just go away and pray about it. If you are on a giving scheme, perhaps you'd like to pray about whether you're giving the right amount, whether you feel strongly called to give something to support us. But please, if you can, gift aid, any pledges, any giving that you give. The joy of gift aid, It's great. I stood here about 4 years ago and I said, we've had all this money, but if everybody had ticked the box, if everybody had gift aided it, we would have had about £10,000 more. Well, this year it's only about £3,000 more because everybody, instead of just putting the coins into the plate where you're anonymous, we can't claim the tax back, lots of people are signing up for schemes where we can get that gift aid back. So for each £100 that we get at the moment, we get an extra £28 back from the government for free, just for ticking a box. This will drop in April down to £25. All that's required from you is that you pay tax on income equivalent to the amount you're going to gift to us. So I'd ask you to take these forms away, to pray about it. If you've got any questions, please don't hesitate to talk to myself or Helen or Glenn. And let's pray for a fruitful 2011.